All right, guys, NFL Week 1 preseason is pretty much in the books. There's a lot of questions, a lot of question marks, a lot of questions about George Pickens in the breakout game. Do we draft him? Do we stash him? A lot of talk now about the potential breakout, the little mini breakout from Dameon Pierce. If you guys don't know who Dameon Pierce is, then you definitely need to tune into this podcast episode for sure. A lot of question marks about that trio that we've got there, the three-headed monster that is the quarterback situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, we got another battle there in Seattle with Drew Lock and Geno Smith. So I'm going to cover all that here for you guys, talking about that and more, and some other potential breakouts and some other guys that, hey, we're expecting something out of them, but nothing really happened. So full breakdown of preseason Week 1 here for you guys. Before I get into this show, as you know, this show is brought to you by, as many of my other shows, by Manscaped.com. Guys, Showerline 20 is that magic code you need. Head on over there, guys. In my hand, I've got the amazing underwear Boxers 2.0. Go treat yourself, guys. Try the trimmer, try the body wash, try the shampoo. DM me, let me know how it works out. Go try their amazing packages and protect your package while you're doing it. These are the most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. The Boxers 2.0, go try them. But in order to even get your balls comfortable in there, make sure you shave them. So use the Lawnmower 4.0 as well. Manscaped.com. Showerline 20 is the code. Go treat yourself, guys, on the website right now. Secondly, guys, get the 16-round drafts. We're a full flow draft season. Don't leave your draft to chance. Get 16 rounds, guys. Sleepers, breakouts, video training, notes, everything you guys need. Printable cheat sheet in the 16-round draft session. I've linked it below, or head on over to thefantasyfootballcounselor.com. Those are my plugs. Let's get to the show. Now, again, thumbs up, and in the comments below, let me know what you guys thought of NFL preseason Week 1. All right? So let's dive into this here. Let's start off with the quarterback position. Obviously, there's a lot of eyes for fantasy, especially as backup quarterbacks or super flex leagues or two quarterbacks leagues where we're interested in getting some deeper sleepers at the quarterback position. So there's been some battles going on. And one thing that upsets me literally with, preseason is that I want to see my starters. And there's a lot of starters that didn't come out. Lamar Jackson, didn't really see him. But then there's a lot of other guys that have the balls come out. I think Pat Mahomes came out for a drive. We saw a little bit of Davis Mills. He handed the ball off a couple times. A little bit of Justin Fields with that one pass to Darnell Mooney that was pretty phenomenal. So we're going to talk about that in a second. So again, I saw some glimpses, but I want to see more. And that's why I hate preseason, because it's such a tease. But it gives us an opportunity to dive into some of these other guys, some of these backups, and some of these guys fighting for a job. So let's talk a little bit of some standout quarterbacks here that really stood out for me. Now, there was a lot of games going on. Obviously, didn't catch all of them because, after the first couple of drives, I genuinely lose interest because I don't really care about the scoreboard. It really means nothing. And I tune into some of the highlights. I take a look at the stats. So I didn't watch every single game to full detail. And there's multiple games going at once. So there's a lot to keep up with. But I have enough insight and information here, and looking at all the stats and looking at all the highlights to give you guys some informed decisions from a fantasy perspective and some of the guys that I thought really stood out for me. Okay, so let's talk some standouts here. So Kenny Pickett, for me, he was 13 completions on 15 attempts, guys, for Kenny Pickett. He had 2 touchdowns. Now, he looked pretty good. I liked his mobility, watched him. He looked pretty good. And then also, Rudolph looked good. That's the problem. Rudolph and Mitch also looks good. Now, so Mitch Trubisky, what do you have? He had 63 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and he was 4 for 7 in completion. So that's your Mitch Trubisky, okay? So when you look at a guy like Mitch Trubisky, you're like, okay, he's kind of like the veteran. He's been, integrated a bit more. Mason Rudolph's been with the team longer. Then you've got the young Kenny Pickett, who was a first-round pick. And now you've got this three-headed monster. Now, Mason Rudolph, he was 9 for 15. What do you have? 93 yards and a touchdown. And like I said before, Kenny Pickett, 13 completions, 15 attempts, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Again, very similar stats. Nobody's throwing picks. All relatively efficient here. So when you look at this three-headed monster, it's like, who is the starting quarterback here? That's going to be a big question mark going into the season. Now, like I said, I think it's going to be Mitch. They're saying it's Mitch. It's his job to lose. And this is a guy that's had his opportunities with the Bears, didn't really get the starting job there, was with Buffalo, behind Josh Allen. And I like the more younger, dynamic Kenny Pickett. I think this is a guy they can build around. And again, all three looking pretty good in preseason, fighting for their jobs here, fighting for that starting position more or less. So it's going to be interesting. Now, how is that going to impact other players? Now, we saw the touchdown pass from Rudolph to George Pickens. Let's talk about him. He was a standout. Now, when you look at a guy like George Pickens, you got to be questioning and saying, hey, do I draft him for fantasy? So he's a guy last night when he played, he had 5 targets, 3 receptions. He had 43 yards and a touchdown. This is a guy that looks amazing. I mean, there's only one preseason game, but that toe tap near the end zone, some people say it was a bit of a push-off. I don't know if there's just people trash talking. Anyway, he looked like a veteran out there. He looks good. I'll tell you the problem with George Pickens, right? Let's talk about this. First and foremost, going back to the quarterback, who is the quarterback throwing to him? Obviously, Rudolph looked good with him because he's the one that threw that touchdown pass. So who is George Pickens going to be catching the ball from? That's my first question mark if you're drafting him. Secondly, his ADP shot up a little bit. I'm sure it's gone up after that catch, obviously making some highlight reels. It's like, who's throwing the ball? And then is he going to get the volume? Because he's typically, he's going to be competing. He's going to be theoretically the wide receiver 3 there on the Steelers. So we're in a situation here when we're looking at George Pickens. The talent is there. I love him. If Deontay Johnson gets hurt, yes, absolutely, he'd be on all my teams. But there's a huge void there, if Deontay or Claypool get hurt. If not, he's fighting with Freiermuth, he's fighting with Najee, he's fighting with Deontay, who just recently got paid, and he's fighting with Claypool. So he's like a 5th option there, maybe a 3rd at best, if he surpasses Claypool, which is very possible. So you got that, then you got the question mark, obviously, with quarterback. So yes, I'm excited about Pickens, but I'm going to temper my expectations. If you want to stash him, go ahead. I initially don't think the volume's going to be there this year, and they got some quarterback situation stuff to work out. So I had to get that out of my system here with the wide receivers and quarterbacks there with the Steelers. And we didn't see Najee play, so that was another thing that kind of bothered me. I wanted to see Najee play. It didn't happen. He's going to be the workhorse guy. Obviously, they want to preserve him. So, again, some standouts there. Kenny Pickett shined to me. So did George Pickens. Other guys that stood out, guys. Romeo Doubs got himself 7 targets, 3 receptions. He had 45 yards and a touchdown. So a touchdown for Romeo Doubs. Obviously, it wasn't from Aaron Rodgers. This is the guy that's been standing out in training camp. Do you draft Romeo Doubs? This is a good question. I'm going to say yes. I still think Christian Watson is going to be the guy. I think obviously Lazard's there, years to wow us. We're not wowed, never surpassed Adams. I know that's a tough feat, but it's a tough one. Watson was the number 1 pick for them at wide receiver, 2nd round. Okay. Then they went Doubs, I think round 4. They obviously believe in Watson. He's obviously the most physically talented out of the group. And, he's had this knee scope or whatever he got done. He's obviously resting out. He's still shadowing Aaron Rodgers. There's still a connection there. He's still following the playbook. It's not like he can't be integrated. And the Packers said they're not concerned about Watson not being on the field right now. They'll still get it done. I still think he's going to be more of a receiver, a top receiver than Romeo. But I don't mind that stack there near the end. You can get these guys. You get Watson after round 9. You get Doubs super late after round 12. You stack these guys, you're securing yourself a possible wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 guaranteed on the Green Bay Packers. But Romeo Doubs, standing out in camp and then standing out, in preseason week 1 as he had that touchdown catch. So Romeo Doubs, George Pickens, 2 wide receivers had good touchdowns that really jump out at me at the wide receiver position. Going back to quarterback, we went off here on a bit of a tangent. We talked about the 3-headed monster with the Steelers. I think Mitch gets the initial start, and then you got the other guys breathing down his neck. Maybe Pickett maybe gets a start, and the fans love Pickett, so it's going to be interesting to see. They want that franchise guy. They didn't feel they got it with Rudolph. I think Pickett emerges here as the QB1 eventually. Then you got the other situation with Geno Smith and Drew Lock, and both of them did pretty good. Now, you had 11 completions on 15 attempts for Drew Lock. Not bad. 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Geno Smith, 10 completions, 15 attempts, 101 yards and 0 touchdowns. They both looked really good. Not really good, but they looked usable, I would say, right? And I think, again, the buzz is that Geno Smith's going to get the start. He's the one that stepped on the field initially and first, and then we had Drew Lock in the second half. This is going to be an interesting competition. We're going to have to see how weeks, 2, 3, and 4 pan out with these guys. Do they start throwing picks? Who really emerges here at the quarterback position for the Seattle Seahawks? And, they've got that lingering Jimmy Garoppolo hanging out there. You never know. If these guys crap the bed, maybe Jimmy G comes in. Nobody's really sure. So, again, Drew Lock, Geno Smith, they looked usable. They looked relatively efficient, both of them just throwing over 100 yards. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out as these guys continue to battle out. And this is what makes football so exciting, is because these guys are not the greatest quarterbacks, and they're out there playing their heart out, which is really exciting. And I'm seeing a lot of excitement and a lot of pressure on a lot of people, including some of these rookies and these guys trying to make the team and these quarterbacks fighting for a job. There's a lot of excitement because, even though they're mediocre players compared to the superstars, they're putting up some good numbers, okay? Now, another guy that stood out to me, I got to mention here, is Marcus Mariota. And his impact ripples to Drake London, who got banged up. I think he's fine with the knee. I don't think it's too serious. It was Drake London and then Kyle Pitts who are going to be directly impacted by Marcus Mariota. Now, Marcus Mariota had only 2 attempts, right? 2 completions. He had, 36 yards, no touchdowns. But he did get himself a rushing touchdown. Now, what's interesting is he looked really good, really mobile. So are we getting ourselves a situation where he's going to be running a lot? If that's the case, based on what we saw, that may hinder the performance of Drake London and Kyle Pitts because they're going to get less receptions. But he's got to throw at some point, and those guys are the beneficiaries. So, again, Marcus Mariota, he looked good. He looked dynamic. He looked young. He looked fresh. That's somebody to watch, especially if you want a quarterback as a QB2 in a super flex or a deeper league. Could get some value there, especially with some rushing yards and touchdowns. So, very impressive, Marcus Mariota. I would have liked him to throw more than the 2 attempts and 2 completions. We want to see him throw more. But yeah, very, very fresh looking, very exciting. Going to be interesting to see how he plays out for Atlanta this year. Hopefully he starts throwing the ball a lot more. Trevor Lawrence had himself a decent campaign. What do you have? 12 attempts, 6 completions. He got himself a touchdown, no interceptions for 95 yards in the first game. I mean, he didn't throw any picks. That was good. So, that's promising, and he looks safe. So Trevor Lawrence maybe comes back, bounces back this year, has himself a good campaign, something to definitely watch. In the comments, let me know if there's any quarterbacks that kind of stood out for you. I'm trying to check it out here. Nobody did anything amazing. Jalen Hurts, 6 for 6, completions, got himself some, 80 yards, a touchdown, not bad. Nobody else really kind of jumped out at me, and I'm like, hey, man, this guy stuck out to me. He's going to be amazing, this and that. Now, from a fantasy point perspective, if that means anything, it really doesn't mean anything at all. Bryce Perkins, Los Angeles Rams quarterback, got himself 2 touchdowns, got himself a rushing touchdown as well for 25.22 points. Now, this is not including the game that's on today, which is the Raiders game, guys. And that starts, I'm recording this at early afternoon Sunday. So Vikings and Raiders go at 4:25. So that's the only game I'm missing out here. But Bryce Perkins, whoever that is for the Rams, got himself the most fantasy points at quarterback. Jumping back over here for preseason week 1 at the running back position. When you look at it from a fantasy perspective, not that it means anything, is Jerome Ford from Cleveland had himself the best game. But the guys that really kind of stuck out to me was a guy that I'm not high on. I could take full ownership on this, is DeAndre Swift. He did look good. He had the 1 touchdown run, ran out to the outside, 4 attempts, 20 yards, 5 yards per carry, and that touchdown. Nothing exciting, but you got to understand, guys, it's going to be a committee like it was last year with DeAndre Swift and Williams. I'm not excited about DeAndre Swift, especially because he's super expensive, but he did look good. He looked good, and so did Amon-Ra St. Brown on that offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown looking like he's going to be a primary target for Goff, and he's a great value in drafts. Give me Amon-Ra round 5. Let me pass on DeAndre Swift, who's round 1, early round 2. Dameon Pierce, let's talk about him. A lot of hype around him now that he's had that run. I went back to a video back in May on my Instagram where I talked about stashing him. Now all of a sudden people are like, hey, let's wake up on Dameon Pierce. Had himself a nice run, a couple of them anyway. 5 attempts, 49 yards, 9.8 yards per carry. Looked powerful on those runs. Marlon Mack, years to wow us, we're not wowed. I think it's going to be starting off with Mack as per my conversation with the beat writer. But you look at a guy like Dameon Pierce, there's some exciting things to look at, exciting things to talk about here with Dameon Pierce because the talent is there, the youth is there, the explosiveness is there. The offense, obviously a little, suspect, some question marks as well with that offense. But when you're looking at a guy you want to stash later that could take that RB1 job, looks young and hungry, you got to take a look at Dameon Pierce. So he's a little higher on my radar. A guy that's a little less on my radar is obviously Tyler Algier, who didn't get any action. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This is guys like buried 4th on the depth chart. And I thought he'd get more. He's on Atlanta, by the way. You've got yourself a running quarterback, and you've got all these other running backs. It didn't look good for a guy who I thought was a decent bench stash, Tyler Algier, so it didn't look good for him. It also didn't really look good for Isaiah Spiller, who had himself 10 attempts, 34 yards, 3.4 yards per carry. not that exciting for him as well. And they use Kelly and Roundtree as well there with the Chargers. So Spiller, maybe a stash, but as of right now on paper, Dameon Pierce looks a little bit better. Rachaad White from Tampa Bay had himself 7 attempts, 4.6 yards per carry for 32 yards. Didn't get a touchdown. Rachaad White, another guy that could emerge there with the aging Fournette, and they have a committee, some question marks there as well. Now, not that it matters here, but again, after Jerome Ford here for fantasy points, he's on Cleveland. We had Raheem Blackshear have himself 2 touchdowns on the ground, believe it or not. He's the Buffalo running back. So a bunch of, I would say, bottom feeder, 3rd, 4th stringers coming in here having themselves some decent campaigns. Travis Homer from Seattle. I'm still high on Kenneth Walker, even though he didn't have a good week. Travis Homer here, 4 attempts, 41 yards, 10.2 yards per carry. Looked good on a couple of runs. The guy's playing to keep his job, which he has to because there's a lot of competition there in Seattle, including Penny, who's going to get hurt, and then it's going to be trying to get past Kenneth Walker, which I don't think he will. So Kenneth Walker obviously didn't have himself the greatest campaign, but again, still early. Obviously, they want to preserve him. Penny's a little banged up already, and the season has not even started. All right, let's take a look again real quickly at some wide receivers and tight ends that jumped out at me. Obviously, we talked about Romeo Doubs, George Pickens. From a fantasy perspective, again, not that it means anything, there really wasn't anybody. There was a guy named Lance McCutcheon who got himself 27.7 fantasy points. Danny Gray from San Fran. By the way, Lance was on the Rams. Nobody shined here because everybody's on the bench, right? But I'm just trying to see if there's any standouts here. And the only ones that I would consider drafting that did decent were Romeo Doubs and George Pickens. That's it. That's really it. I mean, there's other guys that are like 3rd, 4th on the depth chart trying to make the team and catching balls from 2nd or 3rd string quarterbacks. So nothing to get excited about here at the wide receiver position. Let me know if I missed anything. Maybe there is something to get excited about at the quarterback position. All right, and at the, wide receiver position. Tight end, very interesting. A guy I was talking about here in the offseason as a stash, Jelani Woods, big tight end for Indy. Got himself a touchdown. It wasn't from Matt Ryan, but he got himself a touchdown. 2 targets, 2 receptions, and a touchdown for Jelani Woods. Could be a big red zone target, as I was predicting. Other than that, there really isn't anybody here at the tight end position that jumped out at me. So, again, guys, it is preseason, but I just wanted to mention a couple of standouts. The biggest ones for me, George Pickens, Dameon Pierce from a fantasy perspective, obviously Romeo Doubs. And we're looking at quarterback, and you're really trying to reach, you got to decide who you want, whether it be Geno Smith, Drew Lock, and one of the guys at the 3-headed monster with the Steelers. All right, guys? Let me know. Does something else jump out at you in preseason? We saw some action. We saw Darnell Mooney also do well with that 1 catch. I'm excited about him. I think he's a great fantasy football wide receiver sleeper coming off in the 5th round. That's great value for a wide receiver 1 who I think has that top 10 upside. So a lot of excitement. It's nice to get football going, which is really nice. So again, guys, in the comments below, let me know what you guys think, your thoughts, your concerns, anyone else that I missed that really jumped out to you. Those are the guys that kind of stuck out to me. I could be missing somebody, but let me know in the comments below. What did you think of, some of the starters? Any of their plays shine for you guys, the ones that actually hit the field for a couple of drives? So let me know, guys. Love to hear your feedback. And Alec Pierce also stood out to me a little bit. He was on the field for a lot of snaps as well, the guy that I'm really high on. Didn't do too well from a fantasy point, but looks like Matt Ryan was looking at him as well. And Michael Pittman actually looked really good after the catch, really strong after the catch. Another guy that stuck out to me as a wide receiver, 3rd round value in fantasy that could really shine as well. So Matt Ryan, they had some issues as well. Didn't look good against, I think they were playing their front offense. Offense 1 was playing against, the defense of the other team at one point. And Matt Ryan looked a little rough on a couple plays. And at the end of the day, man, I'm still stashing Alec Pierce on all my teams, and Matt Ryan's still a sleeper. It is preseason, guys, with all this stuff, so don't take it too seriously. All right, guys? Just get an idea. Scout these players out. Take your time. Get 16 rounds because I've already done the work for you as well. Link below. All right? Hope you guys enjoyed this talk. We're just talking football here, guys. Keeping it light, keeping it exciting for you guys. Talking some preseason, talking some standouts. Let me know in the comments what you think. Get 16 rounds. Thumbs up. I'm out.